as long as you get 30 combined goals, that should be your investment paid for. You know, to watch 4 versus 5, 6 versus 10, or 6 versus 7, that's not a return.
No.
You know, you need some free-flowing footy, and realistically, the 6, 6 and 6 should give you that. Well, it did initially. We were seeing games of 2020 in the practice matches. When it comes to the real season, they tend to lock up shop and say, well, okay, gee whiz, we've got sides kicking 20. Can we kick 20 to win it? Should we go a little bit defensive to try and keep them? And that's what it turns into, that defensive game, which then eliminates the high scoring. And just again, quickly going back in the old days, there was I think it might be on again tonight on Foxtel. There was a game which I was lucky enough to play in, this 86 Victoria versus Western Australian state game.
Yes.
Brian Peake kicked 7. Brian Raw for us kicked 6. Waitman kicked 6. Taylor kicked 4 or 5. But that was 24 goals to 24. And we lost by a couple of points. And that was just an absolute ripping game of footy, just standing there watching the ball go back and forth, back and forth. And people got 44 to 45 goals kicked in the good days when it was 30 minutes. So 120 minutes of actual football time, you're getting 45 goals kicked. Cracking game of footy. Cracking game of footy.
I feel that it is the rule changes that are killing the game. Now, if I look at it from a soccer background, in the 90s, we had mass rule changes, and it became the advent of the defensive coach. It was more, how do we stop you scoring with the new rule changes? And I think it's going to take some young, innovative coach to come through and force high-scoring games. I think the way the game is going is you're spot on. It is set up to stop people scoring as opposed to score goals yourself. And even the media focus on defensive efforts over attacking efforts. And I don't think it's a surprise that we're seeing you can win the Coleman now by just kicking 40 goals, which 10 years ago, that wouldn't have made you top 50.
Well, if you go back to the likes of, I think Paul Roos, when he first coached, they became a very defensive side. And all the commentators were then talking about, the basketball, he's from a basketball background. You hear that all the time, that someone comes from a basketball background and they're being taught footy. But guess what? Every kid plays basketball as a junior. So they're not from a basketball background. They're from a multi-sport background. But then you look at Robert Walls when he started to coach at Carlton, and we had a kicking setup where we would have guys huddle 10 metres from the 10-yard square. They would all spread. We'd have one break, one down the middle. So what that forced, even though we were having 2 kicks to kick a goal and we were getting away with easy access out of the back half, what that form was, the AFL started running 3 from a kick in. You'd have 3, 4 and 5 opposition defence stopping us from kicking the ball out.
Yeah.
So they're effectively blocking the ball within that 50-metre area. Yeah. And not did it only happen with the AFL, the VFL in those days. Yeah, it was the VFL. Then the junior side see it. Then the domestic side see it. Then the country side see it. So the whole of Australia has these 3, 4 and 5 opposition defence lines set up that you can't clear the ball out. So that took the time in shot football there for a fair while. And but it's still very much a defensive game. It's still, to me, too defensive.
Well, it is, and the problem is, I think players are more worried about getting a goal scored against them than actually wanting to score a goal. And the AFL is doing exactly that every year. I've never seen a sport where so many rules are changed every year. And what effectively they're trying to do is get the game back to the 80s when it was already there. What are we doing here?
It's difficult because there's always going to be, there's always going to be a loophole because obviously sides are better than others. Some sides are better than other sides. So there's going to be that loophole within the coaching structure to eliminate maybe my side getting whooped to maybe, instead of going down by 10 goals, hey guys, if we do this, we only go down by 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So that, that's the game of chess that coaches play. Yeah. But from a spectator's point of view, you don't want to see that. A lot of people still go to the footy and a lot of people still don't go to the, or have decided not to go to footy any longer.
Yep.
My enjoyment is going down and watching domestic footy. I live in Gladstone Park, and I'll go down and watch Takana down the bottom of the hill here, and Tullamarine and West Meadows and Greenvale and maybe Pasco Vale, and just watch just some domestic local footballers play the game as you would expect it to be played, getting it from A to B in the quickest possible manner with the least number of touches.
I know you said you don't watch much of the modern day football, but Teague has tried to implement a very kick-heavy game. It is very, I know my father-in-law says when he watches it, it reminds him more of Carlton of old, more direct, a lot quicker, a lot more purpose in this year than Bolton's very defensive approach. It was, you hit the nail on the head. Try and lose by 3 goals instead of 5. That was Bolton's tactics, where Teague is looking to play a longer ball, get the ball up there. What do you think this team needs to do? If you could teach it something from the 80s, what would you say the secret to success is? Maybe behind the closed doors mindset. What would you say it is, Wayne?
I'd give today's side the instructions that the rules today are there's no rules. Go out and enjoy your footy.
Yeah.
If you win the ball from a tap in the middle, just blaze the ball long, because as a defender that I played most of my career, there's nothing worse than the ball coming out of the middle and you ain't ready for it. If the rules are that you can clear it and bang it 50 into the forward 50, I then, as a forward, knows what's going on. Me, as the defender, hasn't got a clue what's going on. So if my forward knows that his rules are, once we get it, we bang it, he's in the box seat. The defender's got to checkmate again, work around what he has to do, and then try and spoil or mark or do whatever they've got to do. The rules are there's no rules. Just enjoy your footy. But, I spoke to someone the other day, and you look at footy today and it's a full-time job, and I don't believe it should be, because there's so much time in the day that's downtime for players. Now, I might be way off the mark here, but I reckon you've got to try and structure their day into 3 parts. The AFL make a call to say, okay, you're playing under our umbrella, the AFL. So the rules are, as a footballer, you need to have a job. So here's my thoughts, and everyone will disagree with it. Some may agree. Maybe these guys go and work from 7 o'clock till 1 o'clock, 7 in the morning to 1 o'clock with, let's say, a busy board. Get paid, I'm only going to throw figures here, $100,000 to do that, 5 days a week. And they leave their daily work. They then go to training from 2 o'clock to 6:30. 2.5 hours. That's long enough to schools, and you can do that 4 days a week if you want. And then once they leave home, or once they leave training, they go home. So their day's complete. They're probably going to be tired when they get home. Some of them aren't going to sit on the computer and do things they shouldn't do, and have all this free time to do things they shouldn't do. I'm not saying all of them do it, but some we know have done it.
Yeah.
Fill their day up. I
I
think footy's a full-time edging. I don't think it's a full-time job. I can't see how you could work on footy 5 days a week or 4 days a week and not improve some of the stuff we see on a week-to-week basis.
Man, I agree with you, man, because these young kids are getting themselves like in a bit of strife, and they're all over the place. But it'll never happen with the money they're getting paid and the way they're on social media and that. Like, it's definitely going in the other direction now.
It's difficult because the world's changing. And don't get me wrong, for those that are listening, that I bag everything about current day football. Like, footballers have got a phenomenal ability to be able to collect the footy from below their knees. They've got a phenomenal ability to be able to just spear a ball right and left-handed. But it's probably the game that's being played that, doesn't make it look as attractive as what it should be. They're athletes, yeah, they're finely tuned athletes. They've got the ability to run. I'd love for the old players of years gone by to pit their ability against the current day players working the same pre-season and preparation and look at the skill level from today versus yesterday. It's always one of those crazy things you think about. How would it stand up? How would a Bruce Dool go in today's football? I think he'd be a superstar.
I reckon he'd be a superstar, mate. Just quietly, he would be a superstar.
And look at him, Wayne Carey's, Robert Flowers, Gary Wilson's from Fitzroy, the past players, Keith Greggs, Alex Jesaulenko's, Mike Fitzpatrick's. How would they go in today's footy? The only difference would be with some of the big guys is, Mike Fitzpatrick's only a 6'4". He'd be up against 6'8".
Right.
Not necessarily a 6'8" is the right person to be playing footy, I guess, apart from a tap out, because you don't see many 6'8" or 6'9" down in the goal square and kick, as you said earlier, Dan, 40, 50, 60 goals a year.
That's right.
There are good aspects, don't get me wrong. The game at times is watchable as long as it's high scoring, free flowing, and you're getting your value for sitting there for that period of time and watching it. I don't know. Look, it's different. It certainly is different, but it's watchable, but at times unwatchable.
I think you've got a great point as well. Like, you were talking about golf. I come from a golf background. That was my career before I moved to Australia and while I was here. And one of the arguments we have, especially as coaches, was how good was Jack Nicklaus compared to Tiger Woods? And I think if you ever have the privilege of speaking to the old players, I think the worst thing that ever happened with sport was sports science. And I think if you hear Ben Hogan, he talks about his book of how to play golf was my Bible as a young golfer. And he talks about feeling a fade, feeling a draw. And me as a teenager, I was like, what the hell does that mean? And I became mechanical because you taught sports science-wise, where in Ben Hogan, and I'd say your day, everything was done by feel. There was no manual. It was, I know how to kick a 50-metre drop punt by the feel of it leaving my boot, where now these players are conditioned to having 100 kicks a week. And this is the mechanical mechanism of doing it. And what do you think about that? Do you think there's too much sports science and we're losing the art?
What you just said then, Dan, you can imagine giving Jack Nicklaus the latest, Titleist driver that's just come out. That's what the differences are. The equipment, the balls are going further, the heads are, some of the golf heads are bigger than mine. Christ, like you can imagine how big they are. But, you talk about sports science and explain to me why, and I've never worked this one out, when you kick a goal, you've got to come off the ground. What? I just don't understand it. And you might kick the goal in the first 2 minutes of the game, and you've got to release yourself from the field and go and sit down. Now, this is all coming from sports scientists, and it's a part of their rotations. But God, stop me. The moment you kick a goal, there's so much adrenaline running, and you're thinking, everyone look at me, look what I've just done. And if you stick around for the next 3 minutes, I'll show you another one. But, hey, guess what? I've got to go and sit on the bench.
Yeah.
See, that's crazy to me that they come off, because like in any other sport, if you score, usually you score very soon after. If you're a good player, the momentum builds. It's weird.
You'd have to put that down to sports science, because there's no rhyme nor reason why a player would come off the ground after kicking, whether it's a standard goal or one that he's pulled out of his backside, and you'd be thinking, Paul, give us another crack. Imagine if the likes of Peter Dacos, who scrambled one from the wrong pocket and the wrong foot and kicks a goal, and his coach at the time says, get him off the ground. Take Mark McClure off, Wayne Johnson off it. God, Scott, you don't know. Anyhow, that's part of your sports science.
They would have only kicked half the goals in their career if they kept pulling them off, because they would kick one straight after that, wouldn't they?
Well, you can imagine Dunstall the day he kicked 18. If he had to come off the ground, he would have kicked 3. That's exactly. The real. You just don't do it.
And sometimes they take so much effort just to get off the ground. Like, man, don't be wrecked by the time they get to the bench, but just stay on there. Use that energy towards the next goal, man. Yeah, you're absolutely right, mate.
That's the thing that, why do they do it? Who's made the call on that? Who's talked the coach, whoever the coach may be, into this is what we need to do from a sports science point of view with whatever that stuff is that's running through your body? Because that's high now. We've got to get it down to this. I don't understand it. But I'm sure you're stopping guys from, as you said earlier, kicking 40 a year to probably kicking 60, 65 a year.
That's right.
The average player that rotates would probably, my thoughts are, probably spend about 5 or 6 minutes on the bench each quarter. You multiply that 4 quarters, that's 3/4 of the game they play. 24 minutes, they sit the last quarter on a total of the quarter on the bench.
Yep.
So you're effectively playing 3/4 per game.
Yep.
Multiply that by 22.
Yep.
That's 22 quarters you're sitting on the bench in a season. That's
right.
5.5 games you're not being constructive on the ground. That's 5.5 games you're not having input on the.
Hey, when you were in that period, especially that great period, 78 to like 82, 83, whenever it was, how much time did you spend on the bench? Like, how much game time did you get?
100%. You don't
It'd
get.
be 100%, wouldn't it?
Well, in the late 80s, keep in mind we only had 19th and 20th man.
That's right, yeah.
So once 19th come on and he came off, he's gone today, he might as well have a shower and another play.
Yep.
So then once the 20th guy or 20th goes on, you've got 2 guys on the bench that can't be utilised anymore. So whatever you lose after that, you might be, 18 versus 17, 17 versus 16, depending on injuries. But it was pretty much in the late 70s, or let's say early 80s, structured that, things are going well, don't change them. And if guys were getting 5 minutes a game, it was because the side was either doing well or we have to make a change because I wasn't doing well on such and such, get him off, let's get McConville on or whatever the case may be. And we'd play, matchups in the back half or, offsets in the forward area. So we got a tall against a small, But then, Jesus, the runner comes out, you look at him and you run the other bloody way, you make him work to catch you. We used to run away from him. Bob Lowry's name was.
Yeah.
Bob used to finish the game stuff because every guy he tried to get off, he had to chase for another 300 metres before we'd decide to listen to him. That's
brilliant.
I love the runners. They were my favourite part of football when I first came here. The fact that you get signals that way because the field is so big. And let's talk about that. This is a wonderful game. As a POM, I think this is the greatest sport I've ever seen, football. I'm heartbroken I didn't see it when I was a young man. Now, why do you think this isn't a global game, Wayne? In your opinion, I think this sport is so unique. It's got all the things that appeal to Americans, to English people, to Europeans. Why do you think this game's never taken off there? We know you've played in the Battle of Britain. Why is it never taken off, do you think?
I think you've got to be brought up with the link. You've got to be, by the time you can walk, you've got to have a pair of footy boots on your feet. Look, to be honest, I don't think the American things worked from a Collingwood point of view. Personally, I don't think that's worked. I don't know whether you can taste basketball players or the Irish, yes, you will because their game's so similar. Obviously, round ball, oval ball, but there's similarities to it. Basketball's not similar to football. Gridiron's not similar to football. I think if they're going to promote in other countries, you've got to get them young. You've got to get them young. You've got to get them at 6 and 7 and 8 years of age, and you've got to say, well, is it a sport you need to dedicate yourself to pick it? Because as I said earlier, there's so many aspects of the game that you have to. Doesn't matter what your skill level is. There's so many aspects you've got to learn. You want to jump high to mark or get down low to mark or handball right hand, left hand, right foot, left foot, tackle, second efforts. It's an amazing game. There's nothing compares to it in the world.
Yeah, and everyone's coming from every direction too, aren't they? Like, you don't know where that tackle's coming from. Man, you've got to have eyes on the back of your head, really, don't you?
Well, Rocco, they've tried it, mate, but, some of the rugby guys, they've had a go at it. That was all promotional. Yep. But they're never going to be up to the standard that you would expect from a league footballer. I think you've got to keep it in your own backyard, to be honest. If you want to keep it as a spectacle, you bring in too many outsiders from different sports, and you've got to teach them that it's going to take them so long to learn it. They're not going to be fully au fait with the skill level required. I don't know, Dan. I don't know. I can't answer your question. I think it's a pretty unique game, and it's only a certain brand of people that can play it. And I think it's Australian owned, Australian made, and that's the way it's going to be.
I think that's part of the beauty of it as well. Like as a foreigner loving this game, it's the heritage that comes with it. It's the indigenous communities that are a massive part of it. It's the local footy communities in countries as well. Like we know you coached country football for after you finished. Like it's that beautiful community that this game has. And I think the wonderful thing about you guys as well, your ex-footballers, is it's the human element you guys have. If we went back and spoke to an 80s soccer player, they're above everyone else. That's mentally they've risen. But I always think football's beautiful because everyone's equal. It's a wonderful sport.
It is, and you know, regional football, and good mate of mine, Desi English, a teammate, and you know, played in premierships together, and you know, Desi and I'll ring Desi up during the footy season. I'll say, well, can you get a leave pass for the weekend? What are we going to do? And, you know, we'll drive into country New South Wales and we'll book a pub and we'll just go and watch the local side play. So we'll get up there on a Friday. We go to a place called Coolaman, which is New South Wales, up past Miranda, and it's actually where Des's dad and 5 brothers all played footy together. So we decided to drive up there. We stay in a pub. We have a reasonably solid night in the pub. We go and spend the day at the footy and watch the locals, and you know, we've got to know this town reasonably well. It's half split rugby, football. One of the young boys actually won the sprint this year, a Sudanese lad. He wore a green jumper with the grasshoppers on it. Well, that's Coolaman up in New South Wales. But, you know, it's a 5.5 hour trip to go and watch a game of footy, and that's what we love to do. We're going to go and watch more footy in, you know, parts of New South Wales and see more of different divisions and, you know, in the rugby, rugby league area and football, and see how it, you know, intermingles. It's a weekend away, and it's just seeing different parts of Victoria and then the footy that's played.
I love it. Love it. Love it.
Well, Wayne, thank you ever so much for joining us. It's been an absolute honour having you, and we've learnt so much. Me personally, I feel like I've got a new lease of life. It's a great game, and it's been great chatting to you, my friend.
Well, that's the longest 10 minutes I've put aside in my day, guys, for a long time.
That's it, mate. We love it, man. This is doing the best. I mean, everyone's going to love this, man. We love your insight, yeah. And we did say, like, we'll only take 10-15 minutes, but you like to talk about the game, I can see.
Oh, look, mate, I get wound up a bit. You know,
I love it.
Yeah, I get upset at times with what I see, but I get excited at times with what I see. And, you know, if you don't say anything, look, I just love someone to see it. And I've spoken to ex-coaches and people that I know outside of footy that have got some influence. And I keep saying them every so often, you know, just have a word and see. Let's see if we can get that distance changed to 30 metres of kicking distance. You know, it's just quickly, if you were to recruit a young kid from the TAC at 18 years of age and you put him through the tests they put them through, if this kid can't handball 20 metres right hand and left hand, you wouldn't recruit him, would you? Why is our kicking distance 15 metres when everybody can handball preferred and non-preferred side 20 metres? Shouldn't you be able to kick the ball further than you can handball? Come on, AFL, let's look at it. 30 to 35. Let's open the game up and treat it as a true 30 to 35. So, you know, if they can handball 20 to 25, kicking distance has got to be further than the handball.
I love it. I love it.
I love it.
You know what? Someone will come up with that. Someone will hear it. They'll put it. They'll get the credit for it, and the little fat fella will get nothing.
No, mate, we've got this on video, mate. We're gonna credit you for it, mate.
Yeah, but that can get me into trouble too, pal. So don't, you know, just we'll keep that between us at this stage.
Yeah, that's it. Loving it, Wayne.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys. God bless.
Enjoy the day.